For the next 30 minutes, you have a chance to call the law. Keith Williams and Don Higley are here to answer your criminal and civil law questions. Call now, 561-TALK. That's 561-8255.
Good evening, Eastern North Carolina, and welcome to Call the Law. I'm your host, criminal attorney Keith Williams, and with me is my co-host, civil attorney Don Higley. We're here every Tuesday night from 6:30 to 7, live on the radio 103.7, the source for talk, news, and information, and live on the TV, Greenville's Cable Channel 7. This is your chance to talk to a lawyer for free, to learn everything you always wanted to know about the law but were afraid to ask. We invite you to call us at 561-TALK. That's 561-8255, and join the conversation. Don, happy Tuesday.
Happy Tuesday. Here we are. Happy basketball day.
Happy
Maryland
basketball.
Terrapins and ECU playing at the same time.
That's
Who would
right.
have thought that a month ago?
That's right. UNC, are they playing tonight?
No, actually, they're not.
Oh, that's right. They lost on Sunday.
They did. They lost, and they got destroyed in the second half. Not just lost, they humiliated themselves, embarrassed themselves, gave themselves a bad taste in their mouth for the whole offseason.
Well, if you're listening tonight, you know that we're live Tuesday, March 26th. We're talking about basketball. Don had a little comment last week about how he had to leave early because Maryland had to play in an NIT game. But as I texted to Don over the weekend, at least we're still playing.
Yeah, he liked rubbing that in.
Hey, if you have questions tonight for Don about the civil law, questions for me about the criminal law, we invite you to give us a call at 561-TALK, 561-8255. We've got DJ holding on the line. DJ, welcome to Call the Law.
Thank you.
How are you?
Very well. How are you?
Doing fine. What can we do for you tonight?
Well, I just want to say we've been listening to y'all for over a year, and last year some of the best advice I ever heard y'all say was get a freaking lawyer.
That is good advice.
That was good advice. We had a contractor come do some work on our home. We knew about how much it was going to cost to do the work, and he gave us bill at the end after we gave him some money down to start it, and then we got a letter from him that said the final bill was $50. So we were like, good, because we thought it was going to be like $4,000. So we called him up and we said, we'll be in to pay you the $50. And he said, well, one of my secretaries made a mistake, and you still owe me $4,000-something. Legally, in court, do we really owe him that? Because he sent us a final bill that said, thank you, for choosing our company and everything like that, and your final bill is $48.
Yeah, I think that legally he can undo that scrivener's error is what they call that. They always have a fancy old term for something like that. But as long as it's obvious on the face and putting together the other facts outside the actual document itself, that you were not going to get that job done for $50, then he's got the right to prove what the rightful amount was outside of the contract. He'd have a bigger problem if he was, deeding you some property or entering into a contract to buy property. Actually, the way it went was he needed so much down to complete the job. Mm-hmm. And then when the job was almost completed, he said that the balance would be $50, and then he sent us a bill for $4,000 more. Yeah, well, two separate issues. Number one, just purely on his paralegal, who's probably no longer employed, leaving off those 2 zeros, there's no defense there. So the mere fact that she makes that error and you kind of have him nailed is not enough to get out of paying him for the work he did. However, he's now left without a written deal and without a bill that accurately stated his job. And if he agreed to do that job for a specific amount and didn't get it done, and you didn't agree to have him go over, then that's a completely different ballgame, and that's what all my lawsuits were about. When I did a lot of construction litigation historically, and they were all about misunderstandings about how much a job was going to cost, and not having it in writing. And that's where you guys would be in a dispute about whether he made you aware that it could be that amount. And you coming back and saying, no, you said to me that it wouldn't be any more than X, or you coming back and saying, we didn't talk about it at all, but this is an unreasonable amount based on my investigation and what other contractors have told me this should cost. So that's where you would be on the second issue.
Okay.
But, hopefully you can work it out. It doesn't appear that there's a huge gap. And one of the stories I tell, I now have a new one where I don't know where I was. I travel a lot, as the radio audience will know. And I was gone, and I come back, and my yard is just looking wonderfully beautiful. And I was like, I got a feeling my wife didn't do this. So I said, how much is this going to cost, honey? She named me out a number, and it turned out to be a little bit higher than that. And I ended up paying it, and sometimes you end up saying, well, I'm going to use somebody else next time. But arguing about it, going downtown, going to court, all those transaction costs sometimes are more than what the person overcharged you.
Okay. I appreciate it. What was the name of that? What was that term you used?
Scrivener's error. That's what the ex-secretary did.
Okay. Scrivener's error.
Yeah.
All right. Well, appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, DJ.
Bye-bye.
561-8255, 561-TALK. If you have questions about the civil law for Don, questions about the criminal law for me, 561-8255. Don, I think that's excellent advice, because sometimes, like you said, going down to the courthouse and going through the hassle of a lawsuit is really not worth the time and the money that you're fighting over.
Right. I deal with it on a larger scale a lot, where you're not at 4,000 and 5,000, but you may be at 45 and 50. And you just can't justify going down there for that money. Sometimes you can. Sometimes when you're at 50, that's your absolute rock bottom. And because you have a very good chance at 175, you won't settle for 45. But more times than not, if you get that close, they're going to expect you to resolve it, and the judge is going to expect you to resolve it.
Right, exactly. 561-8255, 561-TALK. Yeah, the question about an error and things that you receive in the mail, it reminds me of something that they mentioned one day in law school. I think it was a civil procedure professor who was just bringing up random laws, but it reminded me, I've never forgotten this, Title 39, United States Code, Section 3009. If you get something in the mail that you did not order, you do not have to pay for it.
Wow, I did not know that.
You do not have to return it.
You can keep it?
You can keep it.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Because this statute, 39 U.S.C. 3009, is designed to protect you against the practice of a company sending you an item and then sending you a bill.
Right.
And you feel guilty. Well, I must have ordered it. Maybe I didn't remember what I did
wife
on.
did. Or,
yeah, exactly.
Or I
Home
just
Shopping
keep this.
Network. Exactly. I feel bad about it. Companies are not allowed to do that. They can't just send you the item and then send you a bill for it. If they send you the item, you can return it if you want, or you could throw it away, or you can keep it, and you don't have to pay for it.
Interesting. I've never had anybody send me anything, but I'll keep that in mind.
And Don's address is?
Don't tell them. I've got enemies.
561-8255, 561-TALK. And before I forget, I want to thank DJ and everybody who listens to us so faithfully on 103.7 and watches on Greenville's Cable Channel 7. I talked to somebody over the weekend, Don, a friend who said that he's listening every Tuesday night.
Yeah, I forgot to ask where DJ was from. I'd be interested in hearing that. We used to ask him when they called in, but
right.
Yeah, we've got a wide-ranging audience.
Signal goes all the way from Elizabeth City down to Kinston.
Yeah, it goes. It is real strong going down 64. I was doing that today. It gets a little weak depending on your radio that you've got in your car when you get to Elizabeth City, but it definitely comes in there.
That's great. So thanks for everybody who's listening tonight and watching. 561-TALK, 561-8255. Don, I saw a headline today in the Daily Reflector, Greenville's newspaper, talking about an armed robbery that was at the Family Dollar store over the weekend.
Which location is it?
625 South Memorial Drive.
No, I don't go there.
said officers responded shortly after 8:10 p.m., where a man with a red bandana over his face threatened the clerk and made off with the cash. There's always video of these things.
Stacks of $1 bills, apparently. When
Family a dollar. That's right. Large bag.
You could have gone to the family $100.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I don't make light of an armed robbery. That's terrible.
Yeah. Sometimes you just have to on a Tuesday.
Serious point, though, that I'm going to make. They're always on video, and it seems like almost all the time the folks are caught, or not, if not all the time, a lot of times the folks are caught because the video gets played, people recognize them, there's Crime Stoppers rewards. And what people need to understand before they commit an armed robbery is not only is it illegal and will you be charged in state court, but you can also be charged in federal court.
Yeah.
There's a thing called the Hobbs Act, which is designed to protect businesses that operate in interstate commerce. And that means any business, essentially, that does business, even if it's all within the state. The theory behind the law is that if they did that business all throughout the country, they would affect interstate commerce. So any business that you go into is going to be deemed to be an interstate commerce, even if they have all their locations just within North Carolina. And when you go and commit an armed robbery or some other crime that affects interstate commerce, Congress has said that you can be prosecuted under the Hobbs Act. And what these clowns need to know before they go in there and commit an armed robbery is that they're not looking at just potentially state court time. They're looking at a whole lot of time in federal court.
Yeah, they have much stricter sentencing guidelines in federal court.
Well, that's right, because you've got not only the robbery violation, the Hobbs Act, but you can also be tagged with the use of a firearm during a crime of violence.
Right.
Which adds another 5 years consecutive. So you're easily, with no prior record, easily coming out 5 to 10 years in prison if you're shipped over to federal court. And I can just tell you that they're shipping a lot of these cases over to federal court because they're just daggone tired of it.
Yeah, right. And, obviously, unfortunately, as I've said before on the show, the guy with the bandana at the Family Dollar is not thinking it through. But if he did, he would know that this was a bad idea.
He'd go to the family $100.
Go to the family $1,000.
I'll never be able to carry all those dollar bills.
At least make it worth your while.
Went to the 99-cent store. I said, how much is this?
Yeah.
561-8255, 561-TALK. We've got David holding on the line. David, welcome to Call the Law.
Good evening. I just turned on the radio, so I don't know if you addressed it at the beginning. Amanda Knox. I want to know if she has any protections being a U.S. citizen and being in the continental U.S. To avoid going back overseas to be tried again.
That's a good question because I had that I'm a lawyer, and I didn't know the answer to that. I had that very same question when I heard they were bringing her back up on charges.
Yeah, fill the audience in a little bit, Don, on the current events there.
Yeah, well, the all I heard was a quick blurb in the morning that as people who didn't go way back and follow this is a person from Seattle, Washington, who was over there as an exchange student living with a couple of people, apparently got mixed up with a guy who was a bit unsavory, and she was in the ballpark area when somebody was murdered, and went through Italy's system. Is completely different than ours. I'm not familiar with it, but the trial lasted like 42 months, and then they adjourned, and she was in jail this whole time, and it was really an odd way, I thought, to mete out criminal justice. But ultimately, I think the appellate court set her free, and then she went home, and she's in the States now, and I just heard this morning that they're recharging her.
Yeah, and just doing a quick web search here, apparently she has no plans to go back to Italy, and it's going to be a question of double jeopardy because she's already spent 4 years in prison in Italy, and she was released when her conviction was overturned, and she returned to the United States. And so she would have to be extradited, which means Italy would have to make a formal request that the United States send her back to Italy. And the question is whether the United States would comply with that, because the United States has the right to say, look, under our laws, she couldn't be prosecuted again because it would be double jeopardy. And just to, again, a quick scan of the Google here. Oh, great Google, tell me the answer. Quick scan of the Google is that the experts are disagreeing, the folks who are experts in international law. I would think if I was her lawyer, I would tell her absolutely, number one, do not go back to Italy, because as soon as you go back to Italy, you waive extradition, you waive any protections you might have.
Well, I'm sure she doesn't have any big desire to go back there.
And then second, well, what if they have a trial without me? Well, if they have a trial without you, that's fine. They can convict you, but they can't make you serve the sentence unless the United States forces you to go back over there. And again, that's the issue that's got to be litigated. And just a quick scan would suggest that would have to go up to the United States Supreme Court. So it's an extremely interesting issue. Frankly, I'm a little surprised that Italy agreed to release her, or at least agreed to let her return to the United States without some kind of agreement in place that she waived extradition in the event that her case was overturned and reversed and a new trial set on appeal.
Yeah, and another interesting apparent difference in Italy's law, you would think once in North Carolina, when you go up to the Court of Appeals, it's usually over when you get released because of the principles of double jeopardy that you've just talked about. So, the short answer, David, is we don't know the answer to your question, but that's a real complicated one that it would require knowledge of both Italian law and U.S. extradition law.
Yeah, it looks like what's going to happen is she's going to refuse to go back voluntarily. Italy will end up extraditing her, and the legal issue is whether the United States would recognize that in face of a double jeopardy violation. That's apparently an unsettled legal issue that may have to be settled ultimately by the U.S. Supreme Court.
Gotcha.
Hey, David, that's a great call. Thanks for making us think tonight.
All right, thank you.
561-8255, 561-TALK. I can't help but think, Don, a remark on the fact that we had something called the American Revolution.
Yeah, well, we definitely did.
And it broke us off from Europe and gave us a lot of legal protections that they don't have.
Right.
Double jeopardy, jury trial, things that we take for granted. In Europe, apparently they do not.
And it was, and I can't think of the specific examples now because it's been so long, but some of the stuff shocked me. And I'm not a big constitutional law scholar, but it was a circus. It was a wide open circus there.
Yeah, exactly.
Not the kind of control that we have in the courtroom where virtually every word is closely guarded and where 12 people are listening to very strictly filtered evidence and then coming up with a decision. And when that decision is made, it's pretty much done unless the judge makes a big error. And when you go up, if the judge made a big error and it resulted in a unfair trial, then that person usually doesn't have to subject themselves to a trial a second time. As opposed to if they were found innocent, you could definitely not go do it. So I don't, the navigating that would be way beyond me, but it's very interesting.
Yeah, great question. Thank you, David. 561-8255, 561-TALK. We've got Jimmy holding on the line. Jimmy, welcome to Call the Law.
Hello, how you doing?
Good, Jimmy. How are you?
I know you've seen in the paper and on the news the guy that impersonated a law enforcement officer.
Mm-hmm.
I was the complainer in that original case.
Okay.
I tried to get the feds involved, and they wouldn't take it. They're probably now kicking themselves because this guy's just turned out to be a hoot. You got any idea why they wouldn't take it? Because, he told me he was a federal marshal.
Okay, so we're talking about a situation where a person is stopped. They're stopped by someone who identifies themselves as, quote-unquote, a federal marshal. In fact, they're not a federal marshal, and they're prosecuted for impersonating a law enforcement officer. That's a state crime, and your position is, well, if they said they were a federal marshal, it's also a federal crime, which probably it is somewhere on the books. Let me ask you a little bit more about the facts. Let's just assume in our hypothetical discussion here, was anybody hurt? Was anything taken?
No, he just threatened to have me arrested.
Right. Yeah, I think that the feds looking at that would probably say, look, we have got so much to do with serious drug crimes, with serious violent crimes. We just don't have time for this. Nobody got hurt. Nothing was taken. Send this guy over to state court, and if anything ever happens again, call us later.
I don't know if you followed it or not, but from that incident, he now has over 5 felonies, I think, charged against him.
Mm-hmm.
He tried to claim, from what I understand, that the reason he was upset with me was I was sexually harassing his wife.
Mm.
That's not happening, but she was estranged from him, and the week before court, she had refused to go along with his perjury, so he threatened to kill her.
Mm.
He was out on the ankle bracelet, which he violated that. That was a felony. Intimidating a witness was a felony. He tried to extort $35,000 from her.
Mm-hmm.
When they went to execute that search warrant, they found over 300 doses of steroids.
Mm.
This all from attempting to get into a storage facility on my key code that he had the code for.
Mm-hmm. Right. And your point is, well, at what point does it become serious enough or aggravated enough that the feds would take the case over?
Yep.
And from everything that you're describing, it's obviously a very serious case, and we're sorry for what you went through with that. But I can tell you that the feds typically are not going to take somebody who has either no history of prior convictions, or this case was not that serious in their view because they compare it to other cases where people have actually been killed or hurt or a lot of money has been stolen. Whether that's a right or a wrong decision, I don't know, but it's going to reflect the fact that the law enforcement community can only do but so much. The resources are limited even at the federal level.
And one of the things that bothered me was they would never tell me they wouldn't take it. They just never took it.
And they wouldn't return your calls?
Local presented it to them, and they never got an answer.
Yeah, well, that's certainly unprofessional, but there's nothing illegal about it. Again, I'm not defending it, not trying to make light of your situation.
The legality of it, but most law enforcement don't want somebody impersonating them.
I agree. And the thing that bothers me the most about what you're saying here is the domestic violence overlay, because there's so much research that suggests that people involved in domestic violence cross all sorts of lines. They cross racial lines, they cross income lines, so-called nice neighborhoods. And when you get that sort of allegation, you have to take it seriously. It sounds like somebody was. They put the guy on an ankle bracelet, and I'm sure he's been prosecuted somewhere along the line. But
he was prosecuted for impersonating the law enforcement officer. That's the only thing that's gone to court so far.
Well, if he committed domestic violence against his wife or soon-to-be ex-wife, then it would be up to her to take out some kind of civil complaint against him, such as a domestic violence restraining order.
Threatening them. Well, she did. She went to the cops. That's where part of the felonies came in. He's been charged with threatening to murder her.
Well, it sounds to me like they're taking it pretty serious.
The local is.
You're just frustrated that the feds didn't take it over.
Correct, because my understanding, impersonating a federal marshal is a felony.
I think it probably is. I don't have a statute site in front of me.
They confiscated 47 firearms.
And
yet the cops told me they consider him dangerous. I said, thanks for telling me that now.
Right, exactly. You've already been on the business end of him being dangerous.
Yeah.
Yeah, look, I don't know what to tell you. I don't run the feds, but I understand your frustration.
I don't know anybody
Keith doesn't like the feds either.
Well, I'll give you an example. I saw a case today, not my case, a case I read about, but I'll give you an example of why it frustrates me to be in federal court sometimes. A guy pled guilty, and again, not my client. I read about it. But he pled guilty in a drug case, and he got a sentence of 35 years. He got 420 months.
Good gravy.
In a drug case. And I'm thinking to myself, at what point did the defense lawyers just say, okay, look, if this is the way it's going to be, then everybody's pleading not guilty. And if it goes slower, it goes slower. Because if you're going to give my client 35 years on a drug case that he pleads guilty to, why would I ever do anything other than plead not guilty on everything forever? Amen.
And you and I are going to pay for his dinner for 35 years.
Yeah, exactly.
And
What was that, Jimmy?
His weight room and his exercise equipment. And
yeah, that's true.
We'll pay for all of it.
Of course, what's the alternative? You just execute the guy, but that's why we had that American Revolution. So you got to pay for some of that. And I want to say again, that was not my client. I would hopefully not plead somebody to that unless there was a death penalty as the alternative.
Yeah.
But the point is, the feds, they're frustrating on both ends. They're frustrating for Jimmy because they're not taking this seriously enough. It's frustrating to me, on the other hand, where you have cases that it seems like they take too seriously. So trying to hit the right balance, I think, is what we could all support.
The original bond they put him under, I thought was kind of high. They put him under a $100,000 bond for impersonating a law enforcement officer. I thought that was a chunk.
Yeah, that's a pretty big bond. That's getting up there at felony assault, even some low-level murder bonds.
Yeah.
Jimmy, we understand your frustration, but, just stay away from the guy.
I appreciate you listening.
Okay, man. 561-8255, 561-TALK. If you have questions about the civil law for Don or questions about the criminal law for me, 561-8255. Don, I can't help but notice that you are exceeding me tonight in the technology category.
Yeah, I have an iPad now.
You have an iPad with a keyboard. It sits up like it's a computer.
I really like it, too. You were the one who turned me on to the iPhone, and it navigates the same way. So I knew that in advance that I would be able to navigate the thing, so I figured it'd be worth pulling the trigger on, and I've been happy with it.
No, that's great. That's great. Yeah, and you probably took it with you today when you traveled to Gum Neck, North Carolina.
Yeah, that's right. Well, it's got a nice little GPS function on there, which is nice. But, yeah, I was all the way in Gum Neck today, and I was just the big news out there, I don't know if you heard about it, is the couple in the road rage incident where a guy got cut off in an SUV, and he comes up, and somehow the group up front stops. I don't know if they wanted to get in the confrontation or not, but he approaches the vehicle, and they apparently are beating the tar out of him when his wife comes up and hands him a gun. And then he fires into the car, and now he's been charged with he apparently didn't hit anybody because he hasn't been charged with anything in relation to murder, but assault by pointing a gun, assault and battery, going armed to the terror of the public. That's a good one.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds like a common law crime there. And injury to personal property, which I guess is the gunfire hitting the car and somebody's house that was nearby there.
That was all in Gumneck, North Carolina. What county is that?
It's Gumneck is Columbia, Terrell County.
Oh, yeah.
It's right above Hyde. I've never tried a case in Terrell. Terrell, I think, is the smallest by population in the whole state. I've been to Plymouth a few times, which is next door, and I've been to Hyde once and tried it in the fire station because their courthouse had been flooded, but I've not tried one in Terrell yet. And that case is pending in Wilson, which is a better place for people like me to be.
Is it Terrell or is it Tyrrell County?
I've heard people say Terrell.
Terrell? Okay.
But, those people have an accent sometimes if they're native. So I could have it wrong.
Well, if you're listening and you got the correct pronunciation, you can call in tonight. As you got farther north there, Don, if you had kept going just a few hours, you would have ended up in Washington, D.C.
Oh, and that's true.
And you could have seen at the Supreme Court a large crowd protesting or supporting the Supreme Court's decision and oral argument. I should say their oral arguments today in a gay marriage case.
Yeah. I wonder if I've always wondered if the justices ever watch that and see the people out there, or if they merely listen to the arguments.
Yeah, you've got to, if you're inside the chambers, you've got to be able to hear all that, it would seem like.
Yeah, I mean, but I've not been in there. I've never been admitted. I would like to go up there and do that sometime.
Yeah, I was admitted a few years ago, and we went in through the Eastern North Carolina Inner Court program. Okay. We actually had dinner in the hall of the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
And
well, I'm in the Inn of Court. I might need to do that later.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And we prayed before dinner. I returned thanks. So there is prayer in the Supreme Court.
Yeah, absolutely. There's nothing wrong with that either. But I've always thought that they'd have pretty good soundproofing in the courtroom. Did they not?
We got to look in the courtroom. We ate out in the hallway, but we couldn't eat in the courtroom.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, I lived in Washington for a semester when I was in college, and it was back in '86.